Hey everybody, welcome to another Bill Sky, the C++ guy. And what we're going to do today is that we're going to continue our variable discussion, this time with chars and strings. Now, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to do this in Visual Studio Code. A lot of people like Visual Studio Code. We're going to have some trouble using that as we get into more complex projects, but let's go ahead and play around with it today. You might enjoy it. Now, Visual Studio Code is available on all platforms. Again, it's a little bit more difficult to use when you have multi-filed projects, but we're going to try to get through all that. So let's go ahead and do our demonstration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Visual Studio Code, and I'm on Windows 11. And I would like to probably create a new project, and really Visual Studio Code is more about folders. So I'm going to go over here and click on Open Folder. I'm going to go to Documents, and I created a Visual Studio Code subdirectory inside of Documents or Folder. So I'm going to double click on that. Inside of that, because I do multiple languages, I created a CPP folder or project or directory. So I'm going to open that up, and then from there I'm going to right click and I'm going to say New Folder, and I'm just going to call this chars and strings, and then I'm going to click add. It asks me if I want to trust the authors of that folder. Well, since I'm the author, of course I want to trust it, so yes. And there's my folder that's opened up. There's nothing in there, it's completely empty. So I'm just going to right click on that new folder. I click on it once, and then I'm going to right click on it, say new file, and I'm just going to call it main.cpp. And now let's go ahead and put in some code, or let's start writing our code in this empty file. So IOStream is the include that allows you to input and output to the screen. Using namespace std, a very nice statement for beginning programmers. And then let's create our main function. If you remember the structure of our C++ program video, is that the main function is the function that the operating system knows that's where I start executing code. And now let's just go ahead and put some couts in there, some couts. The normal hello world. And then let's put a program ending. All right, so we're almost all set up here. We've got one last statement. Whoops. Our return is going to return the number 0 to the operating system that ran the program to let it know that everything's fine. Okay, so I always like to make sure that I save the file. And then I'm going to go up into Terminal, and I'm going to select Run Build Task. It's going to ask me which compiler I want to execute. Now, I want to use the C++ G++ from our MSys 64 installation that we did in setting up Windows. It goes ahead and it runs it. The build ran successfully. Now let's go ahead and run it, and I'm going to say run without debugging. But even though I say run without debugging in Visual Studio Code, it's kind of interesting. It asks me which debugger I want to use. So I'm going to use this GDB debugger. That's the one that was installed with the MSys. And then it asks me what is the compiler that we're using. Well, we're using the G++ and MSys 64, so I click on that. It rebuilds it. It's now executing the debugger, and it's kind of weird because it takes you to the debug console, but I'm going to click on Terminal. And there's my hello world and program ending, have a nice day. So our project is up and running, it's ready to go. So let's go ahead and create some variables. Now the first variable I want to create is what we call a char. A char is a single byte, single character variable. And I don't know, let's call this one middle initial. And we're going to give it an initial assignment of the letter A. Now, if you watched, and I hope you did, if you watched our numeric variable video, The way that this is set up is that you specify the data type of the variable that you're going to create, then you specify the variable name, no spaces, no numbers is the first character, no special characters other than underscore. We have the assignment operator, which we're going to have, our next video is going to be about the assignment operator and actually how that works. And then we have the data that we're going to put into our middle initial variable. In this case, single quote, a letter, special character, anything in the ASCII table. Close the single quote, and then we end the statement with a semicolon. Now, a char uses single quotes, so it's very important to understand. A char is different than a string in C++ because it only contains a single character. Now, we're going to go ahead and after hello world, we're going to output, so we're going to say cout, middle initial. We're going to go ahead and build it. And notice it didn't ask us about any, do we want to do G++, because the first time you build it, it goes ahead and configures all that. And now we're going to say run without debugging. And there's our letter A. Now, one interesting thing about Visual Studio Code is that when we build it, it automatically saves the source file that we just modified. So that's kind of cool. You can turn that off if you don't like that, if you want to be forced to actually have it save, you have to tell it to save it. And I actually like doing it that way, but let's leave it alone. So the cout, we sent the middle initial data and we streamed it to the cout. The cout is the console, or in this case Visual Studio Code calls it the terminal. And then we also send the endl, and the endl is the go to the next line and then go to the beginning of the next line. So that's a char. Now you can also change the value of the char. You can say middle initial equals single quote j. So you can do that, and then we can count it again. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And let's go ahead and build it. And then we'll go ahead and run it without debugging. Again, it's going to flip us over to the debug console. Oh, actually, it didn't do it that way, this time. So there we go. So now we've got our A, we change it, and then we display our J. So the thing to remember about chars is that they're single character, single quotes around them, not double quotes, but single quotes, and you get the idea of a char. Now, another one to talk about is the data type called string. A string is a grouping of chars. It's in a little array of chars. It has multiple chars in it. And that's really what a string is that it's an array of chars. And we'll learn more about arrays in an upcoming video. So I'm just going to create a string called full name. And I'm going to use double quotes around a string. Now, anytime you have more than one character and you specify that in a program, it always is enclosed in double quotes. And if you notice, I can put any kind of characters I want in there, any order. They can begin with a number, they can begin with a letter, they can be a %, anything I want. I put a couple of plus signs there. So now I'm just going to count full name. And let's go ahead and build our, It went ahead and built, and now I'm going to go ahead and run it without debugging. And there's our hello world. There's our A and our J. And now there's the output of our string. So let's change full name. And with a string, just like with a char, you just specify the variable name, the assignment operator, which is the single equal sign. Give it that double quote set of chars, and then our end line. Oh, no, that's on the print. Sorry about that. So we definitely don't want to do that. We end it with a semicolon. Now we're going to print it again. Run the build task. Run the program. And you can see how the output changed again because the value of the string changed. So that's really it for strings and chars. Now there is one last thing I'd like to talk about, and that's how do you get the size of a variable, a string or a char variable. Now in the numeric variable video, we used the function called size of, and you can do that with a char. So I can say count size of, and I can put in the variable name. And we're going to go ahead and build that, run it. And it's kind of a useless effort to get the size of a char because a char is always going to be 1 byte in size. I'll say that again, a char is always 1 byte in size. It only contains a single character. But a string is a different animal. The way that a string works is that the full name, the string, the variable full name does not actually contain the data like middle initial you might think of it, is that full name actually points to the data. So if I go ahead and if I print size of full name, let's see what it prints out. It looks like that's 32. Well, let's look at how big full name is. Full name is not 32 characters long, but it's saying it's 32 characters in size. And that's because full name is what we call in C++ an object. And objects contain a lot more than just their data, or they can. And string in this case has all kinds of stuff that it's containing that really has nothing to do, or it doesn't actually have to do with all of the chars in the string. So if you want to get the actual size of a string, you do not use the size of function. You use the dot size syntax. Now, what a dot means at the end of an object is that I want you to execute a function within that object. And inside of the string object or inside of the string class is a function called size. And what that's going to do is that's going to run that function and it's going to print the real size of our string. So we went ahead and built that. Let's run it without debugging. And you're going to see that the size of our string is actually the real size, the number of characters in the string. Now when we get into object-oriented programming, we'll be talking more about this dot size function. We'll be talking more about all kinds of dots when you talk about in object-oriented programming. But for right now, to get the size of a string, you have to say dot size. To get the size of a char, you say size of the char variable name. But again, you don't really need to do that because a char is always going to be 1 byte in size, 1 character in size. So I hope this helped you out both with Visual Studio Code and a little bit on chars and strings. There will be more about chars and strings later on in the course. But until then, I hope to see you at the next video.